Okay. So welcome everyone to day 2 of the MEDIN Metadata Standards and Guidelines workshop. It's nice to see a few more people today. I'll get the course instructors to just introduce themselves again, just for anyone who wasn't here yesterday. So I'm Rosanna. I work 50-50 between MEDIN, which is the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, where I mostly work on the guidelines and delivering workshops like this, and also for BODC or BODC, the British Oceanographic Data Centre, where I'm a data manager managing data for various government-funded research projects. Summer, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hiya, I'm Summer Grundy, so I'm a data manager at DASH, the Archive for Marine Species and Habitats Data. So if you're submitting marine biodiversity data to an archive centre, you'll probably be speaking to me or Hannah Duckworth, who's also on the call. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, and I also work quite closely with MEDIN and hence Rosanna. Thank you.
I'm Madeline, I'm the project officer. I think, yeah, everybody here knows me. So I'm the project officer for the community-led marine biodiversity monitoring project.
Thanks, guys. So I think most people are probably familiar with Zoom at this point, but just in case, if you can find your mute and unmute buttons, make sure you know where they are, and your raise hand button. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question at any point or type any questions in the chat. You can turn your videos off if you want to, but it's really nice if we can see who we're talking to. And obviously we understand if you need to arrive late or dip in and out. The sessions are recorded, so you can obviously watch them back later. So schedule, yesterday we covered an introduction to MEDIN, data lifecycle, data management best practice, and a little bit on controlled vocabularies. Today we're going to be focusing on the data guidelines, and then tomorrow we're talking about discovery metadata. So just for the benefit of people who missed yesterday, quick little overview. We did a little introduction to MEDIN. So we talked about how MEDIN has a coordinated network of data archive centres, or DACs. It also has a centralised portal, so all data available from the different DACs and the different data holders is findable in one place. And this is made possible by the metadata standards that we use to make sure all of the formats are standardised, and all of this is specific to the marine environment. So this is a visualization of the DACs and how they provide all of their discovery metadata to the MEDIN portal, so everything's available from MEDIN. Same with the local data holders. And then all of that gets fed into the portal, so people can go and search in one place for all of the data that's already available. So we've got over 16,000 data sets from over 600 organisations in there. Also talked about a little bit about general data management and the advice in your community-led marine biodiversity monitoring handbook. So go ahead and read that if you haven't already. And then we talked about controlled vocabularies and how they can be used as a tool to aid standardization of metadata and remove ambiguity. So in this example, controlled vocabs could be used to unambiguously define the vessel that's mentioned, the instruments used, the units and the parameters. This is what that data set would look like after it's had the controlled vocabularies applied to it. So this is why we use controlled vocabs in the MEDIN guidelines, which we'll be talking today, and in the discovery metadata standard, because they help to unambiguously define things and remove ambiguity and support the terms with explicit definitions. So if we didn't use them and we just had free text fields, there'd be no standardization, which would make it really difficult to use different data sets from different people, because things might be talked about differently. There might be spelling mistakes that could sneak in. And if anything was a little bit ambiguous, people might misinterpret it. So that's why we use controlled vocabularies. The video for day 1 is available on YouTube now. So I think Maddie will be distributing the link to that to you guys. And okay, so that's the introduction to the day. I think it would also be nice for everyone to introduce themselves because we've got a couple of new people on today. So if I just go through the list, was it Catherine and Eric? Would you like to just say a little bit about who you are and what community group you're with and what kind of data you're collecting?
Yeah, hi, we're Eric and Catherine. We're working with Sea Wilding, which is doing seagrass and native oyster restoration. Last summer, we kind of went through the data journey, doing some ECAD MACI or sea lock egg rack mapping. So I think we were one of the first community groups to kind of go through the whole process and get the discovery metadata entered and kind of send off our completed spreadsheets. And I guess it's been a little while. We haven't really checked up on it, sort of thing, to see if it pops up in the searches and things. So it'd be good to kind of go back and just make sure it's kind of made those final steps through kind of the hurdles that we have to go through, and that's all available. But yeah, we're keen to be quite involved and do as much data inputting and stuff as we can.
Yeah, we're expecting to have data from the seagrass and the native oyster restoration projects in Loch Regnish, particularly, to be kind of inputting over the next few years.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, Alex, do you want to go next?
Nice to meet you all if I haven't already. I'm Alex and I'm a project officer at the Berwickshire Marine Reserve. Yeah, we've just kind of finished or done our first sort of summer and autumn of rocky intertidal shore surveys, just to get a bit of a baseline of data for the area. And yeah, no, that's about it really.
Thank you. Lindsay, did you want to go next?
Hi, yeah, we've been doing some underwater surveys around Skye. We've got as far as filling in a few of the spreadsheets, but that's as far as we've got with the data so far. So
I guess I'll get Hannah to introduce herself again as well.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a data officer and work underneath Summer. This is my first workshop, so I'm just here basically to see how it goes and meet you guys, and yeah.
Great, thanks guys. I'll just reshare my screen. So, can you see that? Seeing some nods, good stuff. Okay, so we're going to be focusing today on the MEDIN data guidelines mostly. So the MEDIN data guidelines enable us to reuse data. Basically, they're a tool to make sure that you're collecting really good quality metadata. So our aim is to make data reusable. We're very good at telling ourselves that we'll be able to remember information. We don't need to write it down, it'll be fine. But our memory is not as good as we maybe would like to think it is sometimes. So if we do forget information, that can lead to a break in the chain of evidence. And that's where the guidelines come in. So the guidelines are best practice guides on archiving marine data. They provide a framework of information that should be collected alongside your data to ensure they can be reused in the future. They're not protocols for collection methods. You've already got your fantastic community-led marine biodiversity monitoring handbook for your methods and your QC stuff and all of that. So we're not trying to reinvent that wheel. They're not prescriptive of how you must collect and store your data. They are just guidelines. And they're not a metadata schema, so you couldn't just take them and create a database straight from them. The benefits of the data guidelines are that they allow knowledge to be captured at the time of data collection or immediately afterwards. So you can use them as a checklist while you're on survey. I think you have survey forms in your handbook, so those can easily be transcribed into the guidelines. They instill good practice amongst users. So it's really good within an organization to get your employees on the same page, make sure everyone's collecting metadata in the same way. It's also good for contracting organizations and contractors. It's a standard format to work to, and also for community groups like yourselves. Rather than everyone having their own formats, it's one standard format, so everyone's creating data in the same way, which helps make it interoperable. And it also allows easy ingestion of data into the MEDIN data archiving centres, some of which, like Dash, require them to be in the MEDIN guideline format. So we recognise that one size doesn't fit all. Our data model has to encompass everything from a sighting by a member of the public to a complex cruise survey or a historical time series. The guidelines are arranged by theme, tailored to different data collection methods, and split into levels. Where possible, the levels work across methods. And by theming and splitting them in this way, it means you can bolt them together in different ways as needed for complex surveys. So these are the 3 levels that I just talked about. We've got our general metadata, which includes project and survey metadata, where survey is a uniquely identifiable program of data collection, such as a research cruise or a mooring deployment, and a project is a collection of surveys that have been completed for a common purpose. Project is conditional because there isn't always a project, so you don't always have to fill it in. The next level, the general metadata, is common to all of the guidelines. Under that, you've got the detailed metadata, which is all about your methods, like your instruments or devices that you've used, and any standard protocols that you followed. Then you've got the data themselves, including stations, sample events, and survey events, which are specific to each guideline or collection method. So the difference between station, survey event, and sample event, they are very similar. They all refer to sampling locations, but stations are more like fixed stations. So it's a location, like a nominal location that you plan to return to. Whereas the sample events are the exact sampling location, and survey events are a way to group sampling events. So a survey event might be something like a transect with maybe quadrats along it, which would be your sample events. It's a bit complicated, and hopefully it will make more sense when someone walks through the guideline in a bit. So things that you would collect in the sample and survey event that you wouldn't collect in the station would be specific things about the exact sampling time and any weather conditions and things like that that might change between survey and sample events. So this shows how the guidelines can be bolted together. So you could have one project connected to multiple surveys and multiple data collection methods being employed. So in this example, during one of the surveys, you've got an oceanographic profile being collected, which is a CTD profile, and a trawl being used as well, which is also being separated into offshore litter data and fish abundance data. So you've got several different methods being employed, some fixed stations associated with the CTD profile as well. So taking the relevant parts of the different guidelines and putting them all together under one survey. So all of the published guidelines are available from the MEDIN website. They're split into different themes to make them easier to find. So for example, the marine geology and geophysics one, you just open that drop-down list, and then you've got all of the guidelines available under that. So when you download them, they usually download as a zip file with a PDF, Excel, and Read This First file in them. And it's always important to download the latest version from the website because we do update them So this is an example of the PDF guideline. So the first page will be like a summary of what the guideline is, when it was published, and all of that stuff. Then you've got the next bit, which talks about what makes a MEDIN compliant data set. So in this case, you have to supply your general metadata. Your detailed metadata could be supplied as a survey or cruise report, and your data must be in a format that MEDIN accepts, which is explained to be data from Karas HIPS software and submitted in a well-organized folder structure. So for your kinds of data, obviously they'll go into the data guidelines that have been provided. So you won't have to worry about this too much. Then you've got your checklist. So some people like to use this just to quickly tick things off while they're on survey. And that's separated into your mandatory elements and your additional items. So this would be your conditional and optional fields. So conditional fields, generally, they're maybe mandatory in certain situations, but most of the time you won't have to worry about them. And optional fields provide a little bit extra information. So if you have the information, then it's always useful to include. Then you have the Excel format where you can enter the information directly. Again, you have the guidance tabs and the form tabs. So the guidance tabs will look very similar to the detailed guidance in the PDF format. So you've got your field title, whether it's mandatory, conditional, optional, a description, if there's any recommended controlled vocabularies or formats, and then examples, so you know exactly what you're aiming for. And then on the form tab, it will be color coordinated. So anything with a filled background is mandatory. So you can really easily see whether you filled out everything that's mandatory. Any controlled vocabularies will be hyperlinked. So you can just click on them and it will take you directly to the vocab that you need to search in. And you can just fill in your information straight in there. So to summarize, the MEDIN data guidelines are best practice guides on archiving marine data. They can be used for data and metadata, and they're flexible and can be bolted together. And they allow you to collect once and use many times. Are there any questions on the guidelines so far before Summer goes through some examples? Yeah, go ahead.
Just one thing, when you mentioned the detailed metadata, and Summer might come to this with the dash, but in that slide you said, you know, it could be a survey report, and you were using like bathymetry as kind of the example for this one, but I think I was under the impression that the detailed metadata has to, for what we're doing in biodiversity, has to be in the spreadsheet rather than like see attached report. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in this case, I think everything does have to be in the guidelines format. Yeah, but it does depend on the type of data. So obviously for bathymetry data, it doesn't always make sense to put it into an Excel guideline. But yeah, for your data, it'll have to go into the guidelines so that Dash can accept it.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Doesn't look like it. So I'll hand over to Summer, who's going to walk through a couple of the guidelines.
Thanks, Rosanna. So by the way, if Rosanna, Maddie or Hannah or anyone else notices I say something wrong or make a mistake or I've got the wrong end of the stick, please let me know, or Additionally, if anyone does have any questions whilst I'm explaining something, it's good to talk about it, you know, while you're on the sort of the right field. So please feel free to raise your hand and let me know if I've missed a hand that's up. So just share my screen. Unless I've shared the wrong one.
You can see the launch Zoom meeting.
Ah, yes, I've shared the wrong screen.
I think that's the right one.
Ah, screen one, I think it's called. Very strange. It's a different, I thought they were the wrong, different way around.
We can see it now.
Perfect, thank you. So first one I'm going to go through is the Rocky Shore Quadrat guideline. So this is going to be very similar to what you see. So Maddie has gone through and has put this together. So this, as far as I'm aware, please correct me if I'm wrong, Maddie, this should be quite similar to your survey forms. Or like make it quite, very similar to the order you collect it in and everything. Maddie, I don't know, did you want to say a bit about this, or did you want me to just carry on?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly just to maybe put the spreadsheets and the guidance in the context of the data journey that we're working with at the moment. So the first sheet of each spreadsheet is usually sort of like the landing page, and it starts off with the first part, which really focuses on entering data, and the order that the spreadsheet goes follows the survey recording forms from the handbook. So step one is the survey and site information form, and the data in that section is mostly going to then be used for the metadata and the detailed metadata forms later on. So that's the data about your data. And then the second step, which is around the biological recording, that's the other part of the survey form. So where you're recording your marine species and their location, and in this case, quadrat number and the transect and all of that information. So yeah, those two steps are part of the data entry step. And there's the guidance that's been developed to sort of go hand in hand with it. And what I've tried to do is simplify the guidance that goes with the MEDIN forms and make it specific to our surveys and provide examples specific to our surveys to aid that data entry process. And then if we look on the next part of that spreadsheet, it moves into the data validation side of things. So that's kind of what we'll also be looking at today is how do we enter the data that we've collected into the MEDIN data guidelines. And for example, this is a snapshot of a sample event form. And again, the guidance works through the steps of how do we create a sample event ID. And Summer will go into all of this in more detail, but that's I guess the data journey step that we're looking at is data validation. And then what we won't be focusing too much today on is the verification side of things, because that will be the focus in the new year once we've got more groups at a stage where they've entered their data and they validated the data, and then we'll be looking at the verification side of things. But if you quickly scroll, I think to the right, Summer, it should bring you to section C, which is the verification part, looking at how to classify a biotope and filling out the taxon matrix form in this case, which looks at verifying the species and all of that part of the data journey. And again, there'll be guidance to go hand in hand with that process. So hopefully that kind of makes sense and sets the spreadsheets and the guidance in the community context. And I don't know if anybody has any questions about that before Summer takes you through the technicality of filling different parts of the guidelines out and what the different guidelines mean.
Doesn't look like we have any questions. Perfect. Yeah, so as Maddie was saying, so this is an extra sheet. So I'm not too familiar with this first sheet, but Obviously, these are step-by-step instructions which you will use to fill this in, which will help with the remaining sheets.
Well, I guess, sorry to jump in, but something else that might be useful is that where possible, I've tried to link cells together. So if you've entered something in the first part of the spreadsheet that reflects your survey forms, if that data in that way can be used in a different cell, I've tried to connect the two just to make the process a little less onerous, I guess, because sometimes it can feel like the same thing is popping up in different places. And it's just the nature of how the data needs to be recorded. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought that might be helpful as well.
No, I think that was really useful. Perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to explain it the way that I would normally explain it, but obviously Maddie, jump in, because this requires a few different steps that are very sort of specific, you know, to this particular group. But yeah, so I've put in a dummy data set. So we'll start with the project information. So this is the one case, I think, I'm going to be, yeah, this isn't going to be the case now, but this is the one case where we've got a blue background, which normally means it's mandatory, but it doesn't necessarily, the project information isn't actually mandatory, but for you guys, it will be, because you're all doing it as part of this project. So this will always be the same as far as I can think, unless there's some sort of divergence. But this is what was used for Narwhal as well. So yeah, so that is, so a project is, as it says on the tin, it's an overarching project, but then you have individual data sets from surveys which have been carried out as part of that project. So this is where we sort of get to the survey information, because this is one of the surveys which are attached to that particular project. Yeah, so let me know if I'm not clear here. So each time you fill in a spreadsheet as part of this project, it will always be this project information, which can be later linked together. But you're going to have new survey information, because it's going to be a different survey collected on a, you know, data collected on a different date, in a different location. So the survey name, we normally recommend to when, who, where and what format. So the who is normally the data owner, but in this case will be the community-led biodiversity monitoring group. Survey type, it's just type of survey, abstract. The survey code, so that's going to be a unique code that is generated. So CLM is for community-led monitoring, and then oh, I've put a little note there for myself, perfect. Then you've got your group initials, and then you're going to have the specific number. So I guess for that particular group within this particular project, you're going to know your sort of next generated number, if that makes sense. So yeah, so we've got the originator and owner, which I believe, Maddie, you're working on getting into Edmo, aren't you?
Yeah, at the moment we've added South Guy's initiative, so they've got a code, but the plan is that when groups want to submit their data to Dash to archive, then they'll either have my help to fill out the template, the spreadsheet, or once all the guidance is uploaded, then they can also do it themselves. But the plan is to have all the groups who want to submit to Dash on the list, so that you'll all have a code that corresponds with your group that you can then input into the originator and owner field.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so all of those that were here yesterday, Lindsay, you might remember this, but if not, it's no problem. Yeah, so it's actually very easy to navigate vocab lists using a MEDIN spreadsheet. So normally there is a link attached, which will hopefully work, and it takes you straight to the vocab you need. So when it's a vocab, it just means, let me know when you can see the page. You see it? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so when there's a link attached, it means that, yeah, you need to look up a vocab so that it's consistent. So I'm going to put the MBA as an example. So perfect, we've got Marine Biological Association, and this is what we want here, this number. So obviously not correct in this case, but you would put the EDMO ID, and you would put the name as it is in EDMO.
You could search for South Sky Seas Initiative and see if they've been at it as well somewhere.
Was it South
Sky Seas Initiative? It should probably come up with South Sky Seas. I don't know.
Oh yeah, perfect. Oh, okay, amazing. Sorry, I should have tried that to begin with. I was like, what's SSLI? I'm sure I know. Yeah, okay. So that's great, actually. Oh. Yep, so hopefully that makes sense. And then I believe it's always going to be the same access and reuse conditions for this particular project, as far as I'm aware. Access just means is it accessible, so the plan is to archive it with Dash or elsewhere, and then make it publicly accessible, so it's going to be open, and then reuse is when someone picks this data up, how would you like them to reuse it? You know, did you want them to reuse it freely, or did there have to be restrictions, or can only certain organizations use it? CC BY generally means that anyone can use this as long as they give due credit to the organization who owns it. Yeah. So yes, this is pretty simple. So date formats is always year, month, and days, but that should be in your yep, there you go. So that's all in the guidance, the format.
Just to jump in quickly as well, the guidance, if you've not had a chance to look at it yet, also includes you know, formatting suggestions for things like survey name, for example. So you don't have to worry about remembering what information you need to include in the survey name and what order and stuff like that. So all of that should be in the guidance for you to look back on later and use when you are working through the data spreadsheets.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I'll just show you one more vocab on this page. Sorry, I can only think of local examples here. So for example, the MBA sepia. So again, we've got, that's the code. So each vocab is slightly different, but generally you're looking for the identifier and then a colon and then the name. So that would be 74M3 MBA sepia. And we go to platform type, and then that's where it gets to you know, if it's a research vessel, etc. So yeah. So that's the very general information as it says on the tin. So because this is a Rocky Shore Quadrat survey, I know that in your methodology, sometimes you use quadrats along transects, and then sometimes also you use you do zonation surveys along transects, I believe. Let me know if I've got that wrong. So what I've done here is I've created two different detailed metadata forms. One that's very simple. So this might vary at the moment from the guidance because I've just changed this slightly to fit in with the most updated MEDIN spreadsheets. But yes, that might be why it doesn't make much sense. But so this is very specific to a quadrat survey, right? Because it's got quadrat length, quadrat width. Yeah, and obviously talking about grids and points. But this essentially is just talking about your methodology. And this will make sense in a minute, I promise. But the method ID, you're just making up an ID, which seems really silly, but it's not, I promise you. I always do something that's really obvious. So this is our quadrat method. So I'm going to put quadrat method. Just makes things a lot less confusing later on. Spatial CRS. So again, it's a vocab, so you just click on the link provided. So you know it's WGS 84. Then I know that it's this one. So this is our code. This is actually slightly different in the guidance. It's actually a different way around. First, you've got your name, and then you've got your the vocab name, and then you've got your code. But for most other things, I do believe it is normally the identifier, colon, and then the name. Got another vocab. So this one threw me off earlier, actually, because I was just going through this briefly as a bit of a practice run. And so I went in and I typed quadrat. And it came up with nothing and thought, oh, that's really strange. And I thought, well, I know the answer. I know it's, what is it? It's a marker, yeah. Yeah, because I didn't have definition ticked, it didn't come up with it because this is our category, sampling device category. So it's what is quadrat within, what category is it within, and then it's actually sampling device, which specifies your actual instrument. So yeah, but for quadrats, it's always sampling extent markers. Sampling 59, sampling extent markers. I won't type everything. Quadrat length and width. That's just, oh, do you know, it's not going to be in the guidance, I've realized, because I've just updated this. But the guidance will tell you exactly what formats it needed in, if it just needs a number, if it needs a unit, and it will tell you what units is required. I believe it's usually meters. So, and then if you've got a quality control scheme, you would just put a description of that here. So then that's all of our mandatory fields sorted. So I'm going to throw a wild card out here. So if you had two different quadrat methods, you would just need to add another column. So there's already one column here, but say you had three quadrat methods, quadrat method 1, 2, and 3. You just need to add another one because you've uniquely labeled them. So that means if you've got 3 quadrat methods, you can then refer to each of them throughout the spreadsheet, if that makes sense. In this case, there isn't. There's just one quadrat method. So I'm not going to confuse you by adding multiple at the moment. Please stop me if this isn't making sense. So because we know it's a quadrat, for the sampling device, I am going to look up the quadrat. So again, yeah, we have a few different types of quadrat. I don't know what kind of quadrat you guys use. this is the unspecific one, and then of course we've got a point quadrat and gridded quadrat, so just choose the correct one for you. If your particular quadrat or sampling device isn't there, you can request for that to be added, so you can get in contact with us, or you can get in contact in this case with who's this, BODC, I think. Is that right, Rosanna?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it'll probably come to me.
Oh yeah, exactly, perfect, thank you. Yeah, and then everything else is fairly self-explanatory. It's all going to be in the guidance. It's all going to tell you exactly what format it wants. Analytical laboratory, that's just if you've taken something back to the lab, and yeah, you want to look up for that particular organization. But again, you can click straight on the analytical laboratory. It will take you to that vocab, look for the organization. That's the exact same as the other organizations. If you can't find your organization, you can request for that to be added as well. But yes, so I've got a second method here because Maddie mentioned that obviously you do zonation stuff as well. So I've identified that by saying zonation method to make it simple as possible. We know that it's the same spatial CRS. Position fix, it's just going to be how you recorded your coordinates, what instrument you used, and then horizontal accuracy of that. So yeah, so far we've got our general survey information, and we've got two methodology that we have laid out here. I'm not going to go into this just yet. I'm going to skip over this when I come back. So then we get to survey event form and sample event form. There isn't always a survey event form. In this case, there is, because we've got transects, and within those transects, we've got quadrats and zonation surveys. Obviously, when you're doing a rocky shore quadrat, Maddie is going to give you this spreadsheet, and then you know that you do have survey events to do. So in this case, a survey event is going to be each transect. So we've got transect 1, transect 2, and transect 3. Survey code is going to be your code from here, the same survey code from the general metadata form. So I'm going to copy that over. If you had multiple surveys here, just like I said, you can add an extra column. It would obviously depend on which survey you're referring to. Survey event code is just if you're naming something slightly different to transect 1, 2, and 3 in your raw data or something. So it's just if you wanted to also name what it was originally called. If not, you can go ahead and copy that straight in there. You've got y and x coordinates, spatial CRS, which has just been added. Sorry, so this spreadsheet might be a little bit all over the place at the moment because I've just added this, which is maybe a slightly different version. Oh no, we were using the older version before and I've updated it slightly. But anyway, so it's all self-explanatory really, and it will be all together when you guys are using it, I promise. But yes, so what do I need to say? Yep, so you've got your secondary coordinates as well, which are not mandatory, primary coordinates. So does this make sense for everyone? So your survey events are the transects in this particular case. Does that sound all right? Yeah. So we get to sample event form, which looks...
Can I just jump in quickly, Summer?
Yeah, of course.
Just to say that for the survey event form, when you're looking at the transects and the primary and the secondary coordinates, the primary would be the start and then the secondary would be the end. So that's why you've got the two.
Yeah, so we've got the sample event form now. So the reason we've got survey event and sample event is to introduce an extra level of granulometry. So yeah, so each sample event is going to be your quadrat. So this again is another unique identifier you can use to define your sample event. I've just made this up, as can you. Obviously, if there's a particular logical way of doing it. I recommend doing so. I've done this really obvious because I'm really not familiar with this type of survey technique that you guys use. So we've got 4 quadrats along transect 1, which I've also mentioned here in the replicate ID, which is each replicate quadrat, and then the survey event ID, which means that that's how we're linking this particular sample event to this survey event, because it's the same as this field, if that's making any sense. So yeah, and then of course method ID refers back to our detailed metadata, where it links back to this. So it all sort of works together, and it does all link back and make sense why you have to fill in all of this information. So just trying to think. So even though it's not mandatory, if you do know your coordinates for each quadrat, there are non-mandatory fields which you can fill out. Primary and secondary again. But if you don't, it's not mandatory, so it's not a problem. If, let's say you don't know the time that you did this sample event on, you can't leave a mandatory field blank. So you just put unknown, or if it's not applicable, you can put n/a. But the non-mandatory fields that aren't filled out with colour, you can leave blank, no problem. So is this making sense so far? Does anyone have any questions at the moment? All good? Oh, you do.
Just one, when you're talking about the method, like quadrat method ID, you mentioned like method 1, mentioned 2, method 3. Is that if like in your quadrat you're recording different things, like for seagrass we might do like % cover and like blade height or something like that? That would be a different method, or?
No. So it's more if like you're using different types of quadrats. So if you're using a grid quadrat for one, a point quadrat for another, and or maybe a couple of different sizes as well. If you're recording different abundances, that's going to be recorded in this sheet actually. So yeah, is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Equipment.
Thank you. Yeah, so obviously we've got all the we've got sort of the survey information, the dates, the coordinates, things like that, and now we get to sort of the exciting stuff, the species we've collected, the species we found. So this probably does look horrible. It's not too bad, I promise you. So all we've got up here are our sample events. So if we refer back to our sample event form, we've got this particular quadrat, which we know was collected on this date, and then it's linking back to here. And in this particular quadrat, we found these species. So we've got 0 count for most of them. We had a presence of the sea lettuce, a count of 2, and then a few more species up here. Yeah, so our taxon names and APL ID are the current scientific name and ID. The original name is what it is originally recorded as. I know that your survey forms come already with a list, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So that's what your original name is going to be.
Each, some of you will be familiar with it, but each survey form for each zone or quadrat has a suggested list of some species that you might see, and then there's space to add more because obviously it's not a comprehensive list. So all the species that are listed in the survey forms are listed in this spreadsheet. but naturally, if you record species that aren't on the forms, they won't appear on the spreadsheet. So you would have to then add them in the under the taxon name and find the corresponding ID. So I don't know, maybe it would be useful, Summer, if we have a look at how to find those in case people are having to add new species to the list.
Yeah, sounds good. So this is MS Bias, and this will tell you what most accepted scientific name is and APHL ID. It's a subset of worms, which is the World Registry of Marine Species. Where am I going? So I'm gonna. So this was the original name. So that obviously we've got the common name, and then we've got the scientific name, or what we think is the most, up-to-date scientific name in brackets. So we need to check this. Okay, perfect. So we've got one result of this species, and then we've got the APHL ID here, which is what we have. Perfect. So obviously you don't want to do this for every single species, because that will be a nightmare, but there is a taxon match tool which is like heaven, absolutely amazing. So you just need to get a list of species, put it on a blank Excel, save that, upload it to here, and then select some of your outputs, press next, and it will bring all the accepted names and APHL IDs straight to you. It's absolutely fantastic. Don't do them one by one. Yeah. So hopefully that's clear. If everyone let me know if you have any questions. And then, so we have our species, and then we have our abundance units, which tell us what these things are in here, whether it's a percentage count, or whether it's a present and an absent. The one thing you can't do is you can't have a mixed abundance unit. So you can't have percentage and count, or percentage and presence and absence within the same row, because it just, the way it's formatted, it just, you won't be able to tell what you have, whether it's a percentage, whether it's count, or what. So unfortunately, you do have to separate them out to the different abundance units, if that makes sense. And then you've got some extra information here. You don't have to worry too much about this. It's just if you have some notes, if you're unsure about your species, you can put whether it was likely or whether you're not sure. It will say it all in the guidance what you're supposed to put and everything. And then if you have an image which links to your particular species, you can also add that. One thing I didn't say actually is that in this case we have separated taxon matrix formats into Translate 1, Translate 2, and Translate 3. That's completely okay to do. Yeah, and hopefully that makes it a little bit easier. And I realize I didn't mention the zonation methodology. So just to go back to that really quickly. So I have given a little bit of an example. So you've got your low shore zonation method on Translate 1, and then mid shore, and then high shore. And that is added straight into the same sample event form. It links to Translate 1, which is from your survey event form. And yeah. And then that'll be one of the sample events up here. Trying to think if I need to talk any more about this. Yeah. I don't think I do at the moment. I guess I just need to mention the images. So if you're on survey and you do happen to take any images and you would like to archive them with Dash, what we do require is you just to give a little bit of information about how you took those images. So again, another unique method ID, camera method or something. Can't spell. Again, another vocab link which will take you to your device category, so you just need to find your particular camera on that, and then just talks about manufacturing model and everything. And then your image event form will just be the ID is actually your image name. So let's say you've taken a picture of a crab and you would like that to be linked to a particular sample event. You know, you took a picture of your quadrat and you want to make sure it is linked. So you would add that here. So photo 1, survey code. So obviously you just go back to your general metadata form, select the correct survey code, paste that here. Sample event ID, you find your specific sample event in which you took that photo. Image method ID is going to be your image metadata form ID, so it can link back to that particular methodology. And then everything else is optional or conditional. So if you have the information, you can put it, but if you don't, that's absolutely fine. And yeah, and then our last sheet is the biotope form. So that is where you've identified a biotope and a particular sample event. So for example, for this particular sample event, then a biotope was identified. So you copy over the sample event ID where that happened. And then you create a new unique ID. So again, I like to keep it simple. So bio 1, biotope determiner. So I've hid that. Okay. And then a UNIS name and UNIS code, or it depends how you are collecting your biotope names and codes, whether it's UNIS or whether it's using the old MNCR format. But I'll just click onto this.
Just a quick note that the biotope stuff will probably be quite unfamiliar to all of you, but in the new year, that should become something that you're more familiar with. Depends on whether you're also interested to act as data verifiers for the community data. So the biotope aspect of the spreadsheets doesn't get dealt with in the data validation stage.
So this is a hierarchical view, but that's not necessarily what I want. There we go. Sorry, I'm having issues now. I'm going to try the other link. Okay, what I was looking for is where you can just search for the biotope name. I can only find the hierarchical view at the moment, but I'll find the link after this. But yeah, so hopefully this will be more familiar to you later, as Maddie said. But yes, it eventually will come up to a bit of a code with a letter and a number, and it just describes that particular biotope. And then there we go. So this website is I believe a little bit better. That's what I was thinking of, I think, but it's a slightly different format. Yep, there we go. And then it's a much more horrible code though. So that's the code, and then this is the name. So it doesn't matter which format you use because they're both non-mandatory. So whether you want to use UNIS or whether you want to use a different biotype code, which is usually usually from JNCC, the MNCR one. But yes. I think that might be me done for this particular survey spreadsheet. Does anyone have any questions or want me to go over anything again?
Hi, Summer. I just wanted to clarify. So for the kind of survey events, will they all go into the one spreadsheet, or would you have kind of separate spreadsheets for like different monitoring events? I just wanted to clarify in case I've missed anything.
Yeah, no, it does. That's a very good question. In this case, both techniques, so I'll just go over the methodology again. Both techniques are very similar. It's just, yeah, it depends, if I'm honest. I would always recommend, I think, keeping just out of a few years of experience now, if you've got two very different surveys, I prefer them in separate spreadsheets altogether. But I mean, in this case, it's all good. So you've got the quadrats, you've got zonation, and I mean, in the sample event form, I did put it in the same one. Now, what complicates it is obviously sheets are designed specifically for that survey. So if it's a really different type of survey, then your sample event form is not going to be applicable. So if it's really, yeah, okay, so to answer your question, if it's a really different survey, it will need to be on a different sheet that is applicable to that specific survey, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so let's say that, or for example, we've gone out in the summer and done a Rocky Shore Quadrat survey at one site on one day and then gone to the next site the next day. Would that all go just within this one spreadsheet for Rocky Shore Quadrat?
I would say so, yes. So unfortunately, it can be quite subjective. So if you, yeah, normally I would say, yes, you just put your start date on that first day and you put your end date on that end day. Or if you had a few different surveys over 2 weeks, and it's the same methodology and it's sort of the same group of people type of thing, I would say, yeah, bunch it all as one survey, because it's basically one survey, right? If it's 5 years apart or something, which is a really extreme example, you're probably going to need to create a new survey for that. So you would have just a new column in here with a different survey code and everything. And then, yeah, I mean, personally, I prefer them in completely different spreadsheets because it does get confusing. But if you did want to put it in the same spreadsheet for any reason, and you can do that. And I mean, if you're using the same methodology, despite when those surveys took place, you can still use the same methodology and everything. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Or has anyone got a specific example or something? Okay, you take that as a no. Okay, so if I move on to the seagrass mapping one, which I am quite unfamiliar with, but I know a lot of you are very familiar. So is this from you, Lindsay, I think, isn't it?
It's not. It's not.
Oh, it's not from Lindsay. Oh, is it not?
No, it's just observations underwater. It is seagrass, but it's not mapping. Catherine and Eric were doing the habitat mapping, which
okay.
Yeah, maybe what you were thinking of.
Yeah, possibly. I got the wrong end of the stick there.
So this survey method is usually a GoPro on a stick and put it underwater and then leave it there for, let's say, 30 seconds, so you can either get a video or an image, and then you pull it out, and that's your sample, I guess.
Yeah, perfect.
And how you ID what's underwater at that position.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you. This all sounds a lot of fun. I feel like I need to take part in one of these surveys. I feel like it's very important for this work. I feel So like before, Maddie has put in this lovely sheet, which means you can input your data straight there, which is very similar to your survey sheets, and then some of it will copy over. So like before, we've got general metadata form. Project information is all going to be the same again because it's all linked to this particular project. And then you've got your specific survey information. So again, all very similar. I don't think I need to go into too much detail here unless anyone has any specific questions. So here they decided to call it method 3.1, which is absolutely fine as long as it's unique. They've then gone into, it's not. Anyway, they've gone into the vocab when it was a link, and they've looked up that particular sampling device. So you'll notice this is a bit different to the last one. The fields are a little bit different, or some mandatory in one and not mandatory in the other. So this is because we've had like a few different versions of the guidelines come out, and it's slightly varying. Hopefully so Rosanna has gone through and published loads of really amazing guidelines, but only just, so Maddie's not had a chance to catch up yet, unfortunately. Sorry, Maddie, but that's why you'll notice they're a little bit different at the moment. But generally it should all be fairly straightforward. Again, we know what the mandatory ones are. They're just a little bit different in what are mandatory. You'll see that this is very specific to a video survey. Just the next one. So as I've just learnt, this is a video survey. So each sample event in this case is going to be each sort of separate video survey in this case. Again, so we don't have a survey event form here because we don't need it. If I can't think of a specific case in video surveys, but obviously for the quadrat surveys, we needed that extra level to be able to separate into transects and then separate further into quadrats. But that's not needed here. So what we just have is a sample event form, and we are missing the survey event form. So it's all quite similar, really. You've got your start latitude and start longitude, which is our primary X and Y values, similar to the previous. So that'll be our start position when you first start filming. And then should be end latitude and longitude somewhere. Oh, there we go, completely missed it. Yep, so then you've got your end latitude and longitude, but they're not mandatory, so if you don't have those coordinates, you don't have to fill them in. But obviously if you do, it's fantastic because then we know where you started and where you ended. And yeah, it's all quite obvious, really. Anyone stop me if you see anything. So this will all lead to the guidance, and it will tell you exactly how to fill it in. So toe shape is what shape in which you've toed. So it could be a straight line, could be a circle, could be anything else, really. Yeah. And so we get to the taxon form, which is sort of partially filled out. But you'll notice that this is a form rather than a matrix. So it's each done by row rather than joining sample events to multiple taxons, which saves space. In some cases, it makes more sense to do it in a form. So we have our sample event IDs, which should link back to our sample event IDs in the sample event form. So we know exactly where the taxon matches, where the taxon was found. Then got your taxon ID, which is so like most other IDs in this in the MEDIN spreadsheets, that is going to be a unique ID that you use to specifically refer to that particular row. I usually do something like taxon 01 or something really, really simple, because it can get a bit complicated, but as long as it's unique, it really doesn't matter. And then of course, yes, you've got your taxon name, your IFIL ID, which I went through before, and obviously that takes you straight to the MS bias page where you can find that, and then abundance and abundance units. So we have a few fields here which I don't think were on the other one. Again, we've got a few different versions going on, but yeah, so we've got development stage here, which I don't know how often you guys would use, but it might just be useful for me to show you that. So we've got lots of different development stages here, but like every other vocabulary cat we've looked at, this is the ID one, and then a colon, and then juvenile. Yeah, we've had cases where people have found egg cases, and we didn't know how to document that because they are eggs, but they're sort of empty, and so it was really hard to know what to do with that, but you do refer to those as eggs, and you just put a note, we decided. So there's always going to be something that doesn't quite fit, and we just need to do the best we can, or you know, just ask us, because we've probably come across it before where it doesn't quite fit. So again, you can link, if you've got a picture of that particular taxon, you can link it to an image ID. If you know the gender of your taxon, you can pop it here. And if it's dead, or if it's displaying any behaviors. And again, we've got the biotic form, very similar to before. We've got the options of UNIS code and UNIS name, or the original JNCC classifications. I think that's me done for that one. Very quick run through. Is there anything anyone's unsure about or wants to ask about? Yep. Yeah,
just wondering, a little confused on this taxon page, how it's different from the last one, which had the whole list of species.
Yes.
This one, when you have multiple species, how do we fill that in? You just copy add a new row?
Yeah, so this is a form, and the other one was a matrix. So I'll just. So it's just a different way of yeah, documenting it really. So it works for this one because you've got very similar species found in each quadrat, and so it would be ridiculous to have to repeat the same 20 species in you know 20 rows down each time. So that's why this is really useful. But in some cases, you may find it's actually, where am I going here? In some cases, you may find it's actually more hassle than it's worth, and you may just want a nice form where you've got a few species and a new row for each sample event. So you've got one sample event, one taxon, and then the rest of the information. So if you found two species in that particular video, you would have the same sample event ID, and but you would just document it as a new taxon, and then you would fill out the rest of the information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then if you had another video that had got the same species that you just called taxon 2, you'd still call that taxon 2 further down?
No. So each one needs to be unique. I completely understand where you're coming from, though. Actually, yeah.
You'd have the same API ID.
Yeah. So that's it exactly. Yeah, same API ID. That'll be the same for like the biotope. So it's a bit confusing because this isn't at the start where it normally is, but again, this is just an I don't know if you have much experience with databases, but on each sheet, it needs to have a unique reference number. So you know exactly where to find that particular entry, despite what information is in it. So that's what these IDs do. They provide a point in the sheet in which it's unique, and you can refer immediately to it without there being any confusion. Is that okay?
No, also just to add to the taxon ID thing and how the taxon ID is going to be different, even though the species are the same if you found it in 2 different samples. The way that we deal with it in the guidance is by having so that the taxon ID is the same as the sample event ID, but you add T1 and T2 so that you know that that taxon goes with that sample. And I know the formatting of the name is a bit complicated, but the reason why we've gone with that route is so that when you're looking at a spreadsheet, you can immediately know what sample you're referring to, because if you have something like, I don't know, sample 1, then if you're just working off of this spreadsheet, you might be thinking, well, goodness, what was sample 1? But if you've got location and date, it can sort of, I guess, like ground you in your data and then think, right, so I saw these species in this sample, I'm going to add T1, T2, T3 to that. So hopefully that helps a little bit as well.
Just on each time you have a new spreadsheet, does it go back, it resets to 1? So you then go taxon 1 to start from the beginning. Start from the beginning again, would you?
No, I'm so sorry. No. So it works for this one because they're all different sheets. But if we go to here, it was decided that to separate the Transect 1, Transect 2, and Transect 3, which in theory makes it easier. And then matrix ID has the same function as the taxon ID. It's just because it's on a matrix rather than taxon form. But in this case, you would have to start from the next one, 36, because when our lovely data engineer, when he tries to eat all this data up into his big system, it doesn't actually see them as different sheets. It joins them all up. So if you've got 2 IDs that are the same, it won't know what to do. It'll get very confused. But I mean, if you're looking between different sheets anyway, they have all got unique IDs from each other anyway. But they would, because they're completely different sheets, and therefore for matrix I'm going to use max, for these I'm going to use transect, so they will just by coincidence be completely unique anyway. Does that make sense? But yeah, when it's the same sheet, it would be very easy to duplicate them, but unfortunately the IDs do have to be unique from each other. Is that okay, Lindsay?
I think I'm still a bit confused, actually.
Okay.
Lindsay, were you referring to, so for example, if you've got one survey and you've completed a data like spreadsheet, and then you go out and do another survey, so you're completing the data for that.
Yeah, so it's still the same. So it's still the same survey title, if you like, but it's a different sheet because it's a different day, maybe a different location. So
like a completely different spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So then you don't have to worry about the numbers continuing. You just need to worry about it within the one spreadsheet for the.
All right. Okay. No, that's okay. That's fine.
I think Summer thought you were talking about.
Me. Yeah.
You were talking about spreadsheets.
Yeah, that's me getting the wrong end of the stick. Sorry.
Right. No. Okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Did anyone else have any questions, or did anyone else have an example data set they would like to see me attempt put into a MEDIN spreadsheet? I think that might be a no.
I know you're working on some data. I don't know if this has answered all of your questions, or whether you've got any questions left, or whether you want to share your screen and ask anything related to the spreadsheet, not to put you on the spot, but just use the opportunity that we've got. I don't know if I'm going to put you on the spot here somewhere. Sorry, I don't know if you've got a copy of the habitat mapping data accessible, because we could work through that. Otherwise, unless people want to end early, but just a suggestion, because then we would have had time to look at all of the survey methods that we've got data spreadsheets for at the moment.
Andy, it's not this one, is it? Marine life observation, or is that similar to what was before?
I think that's what we've just looked at. I can see if I can quickly send it to you. Otherwise, I think I shared it with you before. 1 second.
Yes, I think you have. I think I had a few different versions going on.
Bear with me, my computer's being a bit slow. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask away.
These surveys sound very exciting. Yeah, very, very fun.
Yeah, it's been nice that some of the groups have been able to get out this summer and do some more surveys. Last year was a bit of a disappointment, I think, on most fronts, survey and not survey related.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be quicker if you try to stop sharing your screen quickly somewhere and search your emails, because nothing is responding at my end. I don't know why. Maybe it's the weather and the Wi-Fi not collaborating.
Okay. I'm sure you've probably emailed. I'm just look. What's it called? Habitat mapping.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll search for that. I've got the Narwhal expeditions.
That's the one.
Okay.
I was just searching Dash for narwhal and still nothing comes up. So just
so actually, like I think what we're doing. Yeah, so actually I think I've been waiting to see if there's any photos associated with those. But I should pop you guys an email actually. But I believe it's nearly signed off. I think I just because we've just had this image management system set up, and so I've been taking extra care to see if anyone does actually have any images they would like to give to us, so we can publish those alongside the spreadsheet. But if you were keen to get that published, and then we'll sort the image out. We can always sort the images out afterwards. I can always do that. But I'll if I pop you an email after this, is that all right? And we can discuss it. Perfect. So share screen somewhere. Okay. Should be it. So hopefully you should see the Narwhal spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's up.
Yeah, perfect. So this one is quite unfamiliar to me, but yeah, I'm sure it will be grand. So again, I'm assuming this is quite familiar to you guys. This step 1 and step 2. where you enter it, and then step 3 as well, which Maddie has added.
Yeah, step 3 is specific to the habitat mapping survey. So none of the other spreadsheets will have an extra sort of landing page, but it's to enable you to enter the coordinates for your boundary that you're mapping.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Did you want me to just talk through this one as well, Maddie?
Yeah, I mean, if it's of interest to those attending, I just thought, you know, if people still have the energy to look at data and spreadsheets and haven't got, you know, dry eyes and a headache yet, then we can carry on. But equally, if you've all had enough, then we can finish early. I just thought, you know, it's a different method, different spreadsheet. You might be able to start to pick out the similarities across them, so that if you do decide to change and try a different method, then the spreadsheets won't be as scary as they might have been when you first started, even though it's a different spreadsheet.
Yeah, we've not done any habitat mapping, but it's something that we'd quite like to do if we can. So, and I've not seen the spreadsheet, so it's quite interesting to see what's on it and how it works.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll go through this quickly then, but you just have to bear in mind I'm a little bit less familiar with this one, but it will just test my skills really. Okay, so again, we've got our project information, which is the same, and then more specific survey information, and this time we've got a different originator and owner, Noel Expeditions. So we've got a survey metadata URL, which see if it will tend to be exported or not. It just might be interesting to look at it. It might mean it's not exported. Don't worry. I won't go into this now actually, because it might just confuse things. But yeah, so it's all very similar. You've got guidance on all of these sort of specific things. So I probably didn't mention survey start date type. That's just if it's a day, or if it's over a month, or if it's over a year. So you know what kind of date you're dealing with. But it's all explained in the guidance, which Maddie provides in a Word document alongside that. Not applicable, so there was not a platform with a name, so that's all good. Oh, it's because it was a person. Perfect. Yeah, so we've got our detailed metadata form, which so we've got method 3.3 again, which is grand. Some additional fields, QC scheme, spatial CRS, and then so we know that we've got all the mandatory fields filled out, and then we've got some additional fields which has also been filled out as well, which is great. If anyone does have any specific questions, just give me a shout. So we then have our sample alert form again, and then of course each row this is using cameras as well, isn't it? Can't quite remember.
Yeah, so each sample here would be this station, like where a habitat map was made. So they're all individual maps of a habitat.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so so sample events actually can be quite flexible, depending on what your particular sample event is. Doesn't, you know, it's quite subjective really, but yeah, also flexible. So yeah, so we've got some images linked to that as well, which is great. Primary X and Y coordinate. In the previous spreadsheet, they were called latitude and longitude, but this does vary depending on the version of the guideline you're using. We've got the survey code, which of course links back to the general metadata form, where you've got your survey code here. And this, I think I mentioned it before, but this is if you've got a different code other than your sample event ID, which maybe the raw data preferred it to, but you've changed it, and anything like that, really. So that's just a different way of referring to your specific sample event ID. It could be useful if you're QAing against the raw data, but the raw data refers to it as a different thing. So that's where it can come in handy. Yeah. So you've then got your taxon form. So again, it looks slightly different, but it's all the same, really. So you've got your sample event ID. And that, of course, links back to your sample event form. Got your taxon ID, which is just a unique ID you are making up. And then you've got your taxon name and APL IDs. So like the previous one, this is a taxon form. So it's not a matrix, which is why it looks like this, and it doesn't have the sample events on above. It's just one row stating a taxon you found in a particular sample event ID, and then any additional information to do with that specific taxon. But obviously, if you found that it would have been easier to do in a matrix, you can use either one, really. But it may be, I'm not sure, Maddie, if you've decided to put forms or matrices depending on what makes sense for that specific survey method.
The Quadrat surveys are the only ones, I think, at the moment that have it as a matrix, just because of the way that the, I guess, data are collected. It makes more sense because you have a lot more species that you're recording. But for example, let's say the habitat mapping survey, because you're mapping a specific habitat, you're not going to have as many species records per habitat map. So yeah, it thought it made more sense to just list them as you see them.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. Yeah, so like the other one, it has abundance units, determiner, determination date, which is present in some but not all, and then there's some hidden fields here. And then, yeah, of course, like gender, development stage, things like that. So if you know any extra information about your species, it's not mandatory, but it's nice to put it. So we have those extra statistics. Yeah, and then again, we've got a biotope form. So these three are mandatory. I think the color's been copied over for this particular one, but it's these three which are mandatory, and then the rest are optional or conditional. So again, we've got our sample event ID, which of course links back to our sample event form. So you know for which specific sample event that biotope occurred. So that's linking those two. You've then got your unique ID that you come up with. And then the biotope determiner. And then of course, so they have used, so they've put the UNIS code name, and they put the original biotope code and name as well. So they've used both platforms, which is amazing, like great work. And then we've also got some determination confidence as well, which is really useful. And then we've also got it linked to images as well. So that's really handy as well. So this is a very specific sheet that is only present for this type of survey, where you're wanting to map a specific habitat. I think I've only seen it once before, and that was yes, during the digitization of the narwhal data set, which is currently in Dash. So this is basically saying this particular, is that a biotope, I believe? If I'm getting
sample event.
Oh, it's sample event, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yes, okay. So I don't know if I'm going to get this right, Maddie. So the sample events are used to map a particular habitat, and then this therefore is linking back to that sample event ID, and is telling us the area around that particular habitat. So that's really, really useful.
Yeah, so the X and Y coordinates for the samples event are the, like, I guess the waypoint GPS points that have been taken as, I think you guys were kayaking or paddleboarding around the habitats, or walking on for some of them.
Yeah, it depended on the depth of water at the time, didn't it? But yeah, each one was kind of the waypoint that there was, like the photo and the biotope and the recording associated with, and then that made the outside of the habitat.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's just each habitat type listed. It's basically making a polygon around that particular area, which is amazing data. And yeah, that's my very brief description of that one. Did anyone have any thoughts or any questions on that?
Yeah, I guess when we did that, I guess we're using the methods in the handbook, which is kind of like, depending how complicated your shape is how many waypoints you need to be able to define your polygon. Kind of each time we did a waypoint, we do a picture. So there's a photo like ID to go with that as well. But I guess keeping up with more modern times, like it's a lot easier nowadays to like go around and create a GPX file of your mapping, which is a lot more high definition than like a handful of waypoints. So I guess in the future, we'll probably be kind of wanting to share in some way like that GPX file rather than just a small amount of waypoints to create more detailed mapping to share with people.
Oh, is your question if we accept that type of file? I see. Yeah. I mean, we can definitely archive it, and we can definitely, in the discovery metadata, we can definitely advertise that we have these files and they are available. It won't be like openly available because it's not the kind of file type that we can like ingest, if that makes sense. But we can certainly advertise that is one of the files that we have, and the public just need to request it. I think that'd probably be really useful as well. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? No. Hopefully that means I've explained myself very well, rather than everyone's a bit brain dead and doesn't want to hear me talk anymore.
I'm sure there'll be more questions once people go back and have a look at spreadsheets and putting in data. But I think this has been really useful. I hope for those of you that are here and those of you that will be watching it in the future, just to see it have someone work through it step by step, and then also see how I guess repeating codes that appear in different sheets, how they link things together, and that you see that you're not just repeating yourself for no reason. And when there are codes or IDs that do repeat themselves across sheets, where possible, I have tried to link those up as well, so that it minimizes where you have to repeat yourself. It doesn't always work, because sometimes, I don't know, for example, if you look at the taxon form, I can't predict whether you'll be recording 3 species or 5 species in a sample event. So I can't input that sample event ID for you in there. That has to be done by you. But yeah, where possible, I've linked that up. So hopefully it's been useful. Thank you so much, Summer and Rosanna. And yeah, look forward to tomorrow. I don't know if anybody has any final questions, or Rosanna and Summer, you want to say something else about tomorrow's plans?
Just wait a second if anyone has any questions. Doesn't look like it. So yeah, thanks Summer for walking us through the guideline. I think you did a really good job with that.
Thank you.
I know it seems really complicated probably at the minute, but hopefully things will start to sort of click into place when you start putting your own data in. And obviously Maddie's put together the step-by-step guides for you to work through. So hopefully that will help you through the process as well. And I believe there's a plan to have some drop-in sessions in the new year. Is that right? So if any questions do come up while you're doing it and you're really confused and you don't know what you're doing, then you can come and we'll help you. So yeah, hopefully that will be fine. And obviously we're always here if you have got questions. And tomorrow we'll be looking at discovery metadata. Yeah, so hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.